Anyway, Jim said he'd be paying for the meal. Oh, come on. I know, but he swore by it, okay? Yeah, maybe he'll do it when pigs are held accountable for their actions. Anyway, how's the divorce? Maybe I should dress more professionally. Maybe I should go get a tie. Yeah, that's better. Really great start to an academic video essay. Very professional, I know. Anyways, today I'll be talking about Langston Hughes. He was born in 1901 in Joplin, Missouri. He moved around from many Midwestern towns during his childhood, but eventually went on to graduate from a high school in Cleveland, Ohio. After that, he moved to New York to attend Columbia University, and though he did eventually drop out, that didn't prevent him from making a name for himself. Now Langston was immersed in New York culture. He did many of his writings during the Civil Rights era. This heavily influenced his writings, and all the poems I will be going over today deal with the greater theme of being Black in America. The poems I've chosen today are Freedom, I Look at the World, Harlem, Who But the Lord, and You and Your Whole Race. First poem we will be looking at is his poem Freedom, written in 1943. I'm going to read the whole poem, then discuss its contents, so that when I reference lines, you'll already know the context. And I'm going to be doing that from here on out. Freedom by Langston Hughes. Freedom will not come today, this year, nor ever. Though compromise and fear, I have as much right as the other fellow has to stand on my 2 feet and own the land. I tire so of hearing people say, let things take their course, tomorrow is another day. I do not need my freedom when I'm dead. I cannot live on tomorrow's bread. Freedom is a strong seed planted in a great need. I live here too. I want my freedom just as you. I think the poem is Langston's way of expressing the oppression not only he faced, but many other people of color did during this period. This was a time of rampant fascism and racism. The line, I do not need my freedom when I'm dead, I think encompasses how many people of color, especially Black people, were feeling at the time. They don't just want to wait around for change because they want to live in a society that has changed. He's also trying to get white people to empathize with the struggles of Black people with the lines, I want my freedom just as you. He's trying to reach out to white people. He knows that many white people value freedom and see it as one of the most essential things in life, so he's trying to play on those feelings. I Look at the World by Langston Hughes. I look at the world from awakening eyes and a Black face, and this is what I see. This fenced-off, narrow space assigned to me. I look then at the silly walls through dark eyes and a dark face, and this is what I know, that all these walls oppression builds will have to go. I look at my own body with eyes no longer blind, and I see that my own hands can make the world that's in my mind. Then let us hurry, comrades, the road to find. Again, we see the theme of being tired of oppression. He describes oppression as silly walls and being fenced in. Though I could not find exactly when this poem was written, I believe the lines, this fenced-off narrow space assigned to me, is a reference to Jim Crow laws. The line assigned to me is on its own emphasizing it, which is why I believe he's talking about these laws. These laws were applied to Black people and were used to oppress them or fence them off from the rest of the world. The ending of the poem is more optimistic, with lines, and I see that my own hands can make the world that is in my mind. We see that he is not just going to sit around while oppression is happening. He wants to stand up and fight against it with other Black people by his side. He wants to encourage a revolution. Harlem by Langston Hughes. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore, and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? To me, this poem is about how revolution is inevitable when any injustice is happening. Most of the poem is about things wasting away until we get to the very end. Or does it explode? Explosions are not something that can be ignored. They're loud and there's something you can't look away from. Feelings of inequality cannot just go away when injustice is happening, like what was happening at the time in America. It's still currently happening, but at least the KKK is not as public. Oh, well, at least we've gotten better. You know what? Next poem. Who But the Lord by Langston Hughes. Why did my voice break? I looked and I saw that man they call law. He was coming down the street at me. I had visions in my head of being laid out cold and dead, or else murdered by the third degree. I said, "Oh Lord, if you can save me from that man, don't let him make a pulp out of me." But the Lord was not quick. The law raised his stick and beat the living hell out of me. Now I do not understand why God don't protect a man from police brutality. Being poor and black, I've no weapon to strike back, so who but the Lord can protect me? I think it's pretty evident that this poem is about police brutality against people of color. The lines, "But the Lord, he was not quick, the law raised up his stick and beat the living hell out of me," emphasizes the problem that police brutality against black people is almost unstoppable at the time. No one could stop it, even if they weren't doing anything wrong. The lines, "Now I do not understand why God don't protect a man from police brutality. Being poor and black, I have no weapon to strike back, so who but the Lord can protect me?" Those lines are talking about how that even unarmed people would get attacked back then, and still now. I think it is very easy to relate this poem to what's happening around the world now. I think when Langston wrote it, he probably thought that by the 2000s, police brutality would be a thing of the past. Obviously not, based on recent events. I think people of color today could look at this poem and believe it was written today. It's sad to see that this poem, and realize how little has changed. You and Your Whole Race by Langston Hughes. You and your whole race, look down upon the town in which you live and be ashamed. Look down upon white folks and upon yourselves and be ashamed that such supine poverty exists here, that such stupid ignorance breeds children there, behind such humble shelters of despair, that you yourselves have not the sense to care, nor the manhood to stand up and say, "I dare you to come one step nearer, evil world, with your hands of greed seeking to touch my throat. I dare you to come one step nearer me." When you say that, when you can say that, you will be free. I think this poem is about how people should be embarrassed and ashamed of racist behavior that they witness, no matter who they are. With the lines, "Look down upon the town in which you live and be ashamed. Look down upon white folks and upon yourselves and be ashamed." I believe he's talking about how so many people back then, and still today, turn a blind eye towards things they don't want to face. In this case, I believe it's racism, poverty, and ignorance. I think he wants people to face the problems of the day instead of just turning away from them, because you can't change anything if you're too afraid to confront it. I chose Langston Hughes and his poems because I think people can look back at them and still relate. And while that's sad, I think it ignites a fire in people, a fire for change, because we have come so far and suffered for too long for social change not to happen. I think these poems could be a great influence on young black and brown poets today. I think they can take inspiration from him and talk about the irony of how life has barely changed since. We like to look back at the civil rights era and pretend that that's where racism stopped. I mean, that's at least what you were taught in schools. But when you actually go out into the real world, it's clear it hasn't. I think the last poem, "You and Your Whole Race," is still very relevant today. So many white people believe that people of color want to prosecute them when they talk about white people being held accountable and owning up for our terrible past. And with that fear of persecution, they get defensive, become ignorant, and refuse to hear people of color out because they have rights. People of color aren't saying you need to pay up for what your ancestors did. They're not gonna enslave you. They're saying you have to acknowledge that what they did still has lasting effects and that we still have to face and change them. Social change cannot happen when we are too ashamed to look at the root cause of the problem in the first place. Black Lives Matter, ACAB. I probably won't put that. Maybe I will. And the tie comes off. Time to edit.